Welcome back to Connected Transform. We're continuing our work on a text comparison tool for the web. What you see in front of you is we have two comparisons on the screen. The comparison on the left is using the tool that we're writing, and the comparison on the right is using Notepad++ compare plugin. Each are comparing exactly the same two files in exactly the same two orientations, or exactly the same orientation. So for example, these two lines in the middle left that I've selected correspond exactly to these two lines to the right. So don't worry if you can't read the text, that's not important. What we're looking at is color groups and how similar or dissimilar they are. And it looks like they're basically identical until we get to here on the right-hand side. Notepad++ seems to allow a state where it has a red line and a green line on the same logical positioned line, and I don't agree with that. I don't think that's a good experience. I don't think it gives you the right flexibility to be able to move lines from file to file, which, as far as I know, is not something. Yeah, I can't click on these icons and move things over. So yeah, and that's the main reason why I'm building this tool, is that the Notepad++ plugin just isn't good enough. So I'm going to write something better. But there are some differences here. And in this one instance, like looking at these two lines in yellow in the center right, Notepad++ is doing a better job than my tool is, because those correspond to these two lines at the top left, these two lines here. So with the rules as written, this tool, our tool that we're writing, is not performing as well at matching. And I think I know how that can be improved. So right now, rules 5, 6, and 7 are all in while loops that look at the look-ahead pointers, but rule 4, which is between 5 and 6 and 7, is not in a loop like that, and it's not looking at the look-ahead pointers. I believe, based on the precedence that the order of preference that we've set for our rules, I believe that if I convert rules 4 through 4C to be in a loop that uses look-ahead pointers, we would probably perform better at matching here. But I'll have to think about that. That might be a future video, or I might think of a reason why that can't or shouldn't be done. And then we return back to here, where it looks like we're performing equally to the Notepad++ plugin. Scrolling down. Again, it looks like we're pretty equal. We'll continue scrolling down. And then now we see a massive difference. So on our side, our tool is performing wonderfully, because for this entire bluish purplish section, all I did was tab things over to line it up. The text content is identical. But in Notepad++, for this same bluish purplish section, so this is roughly looking at the exact same lines now, the Notepad++ compare plugin was unable to match any of these lines, which is really surprising. So our tool, with only a few hours work, maybe if we're being generous, we say 2 days, and I think that is very generous, we're performing much better. And at the end of the day, the results are what matters. So Notepad++, it was unable to match all these things on its left-hand side. So where are those lines? Well, it's all mixed in here on its right-hand side, and it's trying to match, and it thinks it's doing okay, but it's really not. Notepad++ plugin performed horribly for this whole bluish purplish section. And then we kind of reconverge where performance is the same. Both sides are detecting that I removed a couple of comments. I left some simpler comments, but I removed the ones that I thought were obvious enough from just looking at the code. So that's a quick comparison. Obviously, there is a small room for improvement in this area of this particular document comparison where we could do a better job. But we also saw in this section that we are already outperforming the Notepad++ plugin, at least in this scenario. Let's switch over to a quick demo. Actually, I'm going to open, I believe this was the state of the file at the end of the last video. So this is, let me make that bigger. This is kind of where things left off at the end of the last video. I'm going to switch over to the next tab. This is where things are after I made some changes. So we can see you can still drop a file anywhere and you can now click anywhere. So if I go to the old one, I'm clicking all over this drop zone and nothing's happening. I would have to click right on this choose file button to upload anything. So on the new and improved version, I can click anywhere in the drop zone. You can see that it darkened the background color, it increased the thickness of the outline, and of course, most importantly, it brought us this file selection dialog. And let's say I cancel out of it, the background will go back to normal. And you click on the button too. If you want to click on the button, it does the same thing. And you can select a file, and if you do, then it shows you the file name, left.svg. You could drag another file over it. You could select another file. So I think it just looks a little better, and being able to click anywhere, I think that's slightly better behavior. So that's some differences from the last video. Oh, and real quick, let me just pull up, sorry, I think I'm going to pull up our text comparison tool because it did a better job than Notepad++ in most cases. So this is showing literally, I guess I'll make that big. Again, doesn't matter if you can read the actual text. I'm just going to describe the changes and since the last video, and then we'll proceed with maybe coding up a section for UI controls. But okay, so on the left is the state of things at the end of the last video. On the right is the current state. So you can see I just have some styling around different elements, H4s, etc. The biggest change, I guess, is right in here where I added a bunch of HTML elements and gave it various class names. We can see I have a class name for file upload button, which is the one that you can see its position relative top minus 28 pixels. And I gave it a fairly large width as well. Yeah, width 350. And so what that did is it basically lifted that upwards to hide the actual file input element. So the file input element is still there. It's just being hidden, being overlapped by this styled span, which acts as a button. Okay. I added this variable on file screen, and we're setting on file screen, bottom right, we're setting on file screen to true inside the text compare function. And I just added this here to say if somehow we get into the load file function, but we're not able to actually load a file, then we're just going to exit, and we're not going to try when we know we don't have a file. And then a lot of work on event handlers. Added a bunch of event handlers, and the details aren't too important. I think I had this class name. Yes, this class name drag drop active was here already. So really all that changed is just adding some event handlers like window.onFocus. I needed this to restore the background to the normal background if you canceled out of the file dialog. If you uploaded a file, everything worked perfectly without this line. But if you just chose to cancel out of it, there was nothing to pick that up as an actual event. So a little messy, but it works. And then just added a couple of other things like yeah, on click And so all that's doing is it's checking if you're already on the file screen, and if you are, then we're going to ignore most of these file handlers. But if we're not already on the file screen, meaning we're not already looking at a comparison, then all the onClick does is it adds this drag drop active class, and it clears out the file contents associated with that file. So let me go back here and just kind of describe what that means. So if you look here on the left-hand side, we've already selected write.svg. And so what I just described is when I click anywhere in this container, it's going to apply a class name, so that'll change some styling, but then also it's going to clear out the file contents and the name of the file. So as soon as I click anywhere, we should see write.svg go away. And we did before this file dialog covered it up. So we see that that got restored back to drop a file anywhere, and then under the hood, any contents that were stored in the corresponding file contents variable have now been cleared out. So we're making sure to maintain good state. So that kind of catches you up to where we are today. I've added some code here for a temporary auto load condition. So I'm setting file contents left and file contents right to some content that I manually built that will trigger as many rules as possible in a row. And then I'm going to call text compare shortly after those things are set. So I'm going to enable those and go back to our demo. And if I refresh, it should auto load that bit of content, and it does. And because this is a bit small, the first line is rule 1, rule 2, rule 3, and then we have rule 4, 4a, 4b, 4c, and then we are triggering rule 5, which also corresponds to a rule 1, and then we're triggering rule 6, which corresponds to a rule 1. Then we're triggering rule 7, and then we're triggering rule 8. There is also a rule 9, but it's not possible to trigger both 8 and 9 with the same content, because 8 is looking at unprocessed tail content on the left file, and rule 9 is looking at unprocessed tail content on the right file. And you can't have unprocessed tail content on both by definition. So this is just to demonstrate that every rule is working and its various styling. So the idea is I want to create some kind of control toolbar, probably along the top, and then eventually I want to have some kind of controls maybe along the middle divider, where you can either move one line or move a contiguous group of the same class to the other file. Not necessarily the same rule, because, for example, rule 7 creates 2 lines, so we wouldn't want to auto swap both lines at the same time, but you might take all the red lines for a given rule 7 or all the green lines for a given rule 7 and independently allow the user to move one or the other to the other file. So that is a very quick overview of what the ultimate goal is, and then of course to have some kind of button in our toolbar to actually save a file. So let's look at creating a toolbar along the top. So we've got here our container, and inside it we've got 2 subcontainers left and right. Because I want our toolbar to be 100% wide, cannot be inside either of these. So I'm going to have to put it either outside the container or just like this as a first child. And maybe I'll give it some content. Let's see. So I'll just put some brackets, and then I'll say controls go here. And we'll give it an ID. Well, we'll just call it controls. We'll give it a class name. Controls. The next thing I want to do is, if we're on the file screen, we need to have a class name specifically for that. And I think we're just going to apply that to the container so that it trickles down to all the other elements. So we'll say document, and by the way, we're inside the text compare function, and this is also the function where we set on file screen to true. So we know on file screen is true, and we don't necessarily have to say if on file screen is true. So then we're going to say get the container, class list dot add on file screen. Okay, so we're going to add this particular token as a class name to container whenever we are actually in text compare doing a comparison. So I've copied that class name. Maybe I'll put it here. So let's see, dot on file screen. So in this case, this is specifically targeting the container. And okay, so I think the first thing we want to do is we want to make sure that controls is hidden by default. So we'll say dot controls display none, and then we also need to style it. But then maybe we'll say dot on file screen space dot controls display block. So when we're on the file screen, the controls will show. When we're not, they won't. So let's go ahead and give some styling, and then we'll do things like height in a moment. Let's see. So let's just give it a height. Let's say 60 pixels, width 100%, background color. We'll give it a very dark gray. What else? Color white. Okay, that's probably good enough for now. And then we'll say dot controls. We're going to target all the text. So we'll say star. Line height. We're going to match the height, so 60 pixels. The other thing I want to do is I'm going to say text align center. And then we might want to change the font size. I don't know, I think I'll leave it for now. Well, okay, maybe I'll make it a little bit bigger. Font size, we'll just say 22. I think the default here was 17. Okay, so as soon as we switch over to doing a file comparison, we should see this controls element. Now there's other things we're going to have to do, because right now these subcontainers have height 100%. Yeah, right here, height 100%. And that's on the dot subcontainer rule. So let's add a rule, dot on file screen space dot subcontainer. So we're going to adjust this height. So we're going to say 100% minus 60 pixels, which is the height of our controls. Oh, and then also for controls, well, we'll get back to it later. We want that to be position fixed because our files could be long and we could have to scroll. So we're going to say position fixed top 0. I guess I don't need units if it's 0, I'm pretty sure. So if this is position fixed, then as soon as our subcontainers are not height 100%, we need to shift these down now. So position relative top, and I guess this would just be 60 pixels, the same height value, I think. All right, let's save that. Let's go check our demo. Actually, first, I'm going to modify things so that our auto load happens after about 1 second, just so that we can personally see. So I'm going to load it, wait about 1 second. Okay. And if you recall, the specific content that I added in started at rule 1. So we do know that we're seeing the whole file. Let me switch. Sorry, I'm gonna unmaximize this, and I'm gonna purposely make it much shorter so that we have to scroll. Okay. Oh, that's interesting. Why is there opacity? Is there opacity, or is this showing up on top? I think this is showing up on top. Okay, so let's add some z-index. But first I want to just double check that that's true. So if I inspect an element there, yes, it's actually grabbing that. Okay, so we'll go back up here, subcontainer. So on file screen subcontainer. We'll say z-index 100, on file screen controls, z-index 101. Okay. Okay, good. And now we can scroll and we're not getting any sort of competing elements, overflowing elements. And oh, one thing I wasn't paying attention to was scroll bars. Okay, so we do get a scroll bar as we should when the height is very small. Let me refresh again. I'm looking specifically for scroll bars. And I realize, okay, refresh again. So there's no scroll bar. Okay. So there is a slight scroll bar there, probably due to a transition. So everything is getting a transition. So we could solve that by just saying transition 0 seconds on both of these. But I don't think either of these will trigger a transition. So I think we can just say for this one rule, transition 0 seconds. Let's give that a try. So we'll go back here, refresh, no scroll bar, no scroll bar. Okay, good. So now we've got our top control section. We can easily go back to the CSS, change the styling, change the height. We've got it working now. I think that's all we're going to do for this video, but you get the idea. We're going to put either text or icons or both, and there'll be some kind of click event. So maybe there will be a button here where you can go back to reselect files. There might be a button here where you can swap and recalculate. So basically swap the left and the right. And possibly I might just have a button to say replace right file only, replace left file only. So the idea is there could be a lot of different controls here. But we've got the structure in place. So we're getting there. Thanks for watching.